The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Terminal C as Marcus Rivera adjusted his TSA badge and walked through the familiar maze of conveyor belts and X-ray machines. Security cameras captured his every movement, the same cameras that would later become crucial evidence in one of the most brazen airport heists in modern history. It was 6:47 a.m. on October 15th when Rivera clocked in for what would be his final shift. The grainy surveillance footage shows him moving with the casual confidence of someone who had done this job for 4 years. He exchanged pleasantries with colleagues, grabbed his morning coffee, and settled into his position at Screening Station 7. What the cameras couldn't capture was the weight of knowledge Rivera carried that morning. By evening, $19.3 million in cartel drug money would vanish from the airport's secure systems, and Rivera himself would disappear into thin air. The last verified sighting shows him at 11:23 p.m., walking through the employee exit with nothing but a small backpack. His security badge was never used again. His locker remained untouched. His car sat abandoned in long-term parking for 5 days before airport security finally ran the plates. Within 72 hours, news vans surrounded Miami International Airport as reporters delivered breathless updates. FBI expands manhunt for airport employee tied to drug cartel funds. The manhunt had begun. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories and comment below where you're watching from. Marcus Rivera was the kind of person who disappeared in crowds long before he actually disappeared. At 32, he lived alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Hialeah, drove a 5-year-old Honda Civic, and had worked his way up from part-time baggage handler to full-time TSA screener. His personnel file painted the picture of a model employee: punctual, reliable, no disciplinary actions. Marcus was just there, recalls Jennifer Santos, who worked the adjacent screening station for 2 years. Not unfriendly, but not the type to grab beers after work either. He did his job, kept his head down, went home. His apartment manager, Mrs. Elena Vasquez, knew him only as the tenant who paid rent 3 days early every month and never complained about anything. Very quiet man. Never any parties, never any visitors. I thought he was just shy, you know? Some people are like that. But Rivera wasn't just shy, he was studying. Every day for 4 years, he observed the intricate dance of airport security, which bags got flagged, which didn't, how the computer systems worked, where the cameras couldn't see. He was memorizing patterns, learning weaknesses, becoming an expert in the very system he would eventually exploit. His co-workers had no idea that Rivera had been taking detailed notes on security procedures, photographing routing codes, and tracking which flights carried the most valuable cargo. They didn't know about the encrypted phone hidden in his locker or the Bitcoin wallet worth over $800,000. Most importantly, they didn't know about Miguel. It started with spilled coffee in the employee cafeteria 18 months before Rivera's disappearance. Miguel Herrera, posing as Miguel Santos, a logistics coordinator, bumped into Rivera during lunch break, sending coffee cascading across the floor. The apologetic stranger insisted on buying Rivera a replacement and somehow turned that into a conversation about the stress of airport work. Miguel seemed like he really got it, Rivera would later tell investigators in a recorded phone call that surfaced months after his disappearance. He understood what it was like to be invisible, to watch thousands of people pass by every day without really seeing you. What Rivera didn't know was that Miguel Herrera was a lieutenant in the Sinaloa Cartel's money laundering division. Herrera had spent 6 weeks studying airport employees, and Rivera's profile was perfect. Isolated, financially stable but not wealthy, with high-level security clearance and access to the screening systems. The courtship took months. Coffee meetings turned into lunch conversations. Herrera shared stories about his fake job in logistics, gradually steering conversations toward airport security procedures. He was patient, professional, and most importantly, he listened. He never asked me to do anything illegal at first, Rivera's voice crackles through the recording. It started with questions about how things worked. Which bags get flagged? How often does management review the logs? What happens when the computers go down? The hook came when Herrera mentioned a side opportunity. Nothing illegal, he assured Rivera, just helping certain priority cargo move through the system more efficiently. Business executives and politicians who value discretion and speed. The kind of people who could make problems disappear. Rivera's first payment was $5,000 cash, delivered in an envelope hidden inside a newspaper. All he had to do was let 3 specific bags pass through his station without additional screening. The bags had legitimate routing codes. Herrera somehow had access to the airport's internal systems. It was that easy and that dangerous. Over the following months, Rivera became a crucial component in what the Sinaloa Cartel called La Lavandería Aérea, the aerial laundry. The system was elegant in its simplicity, moving millions of dollars in drug proceeds through America's aviation system, using nothing more complicated than luggage tags and corrupted TSA agents. The process began in cities across the United States where cartel distributors had collected cash from drug sales. Miami, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, anywhere the organization had significant retail operations. The money was counted, bundled, and sealed in vacuum-packed bags to reduce volume and eliminate odors. These cash bundles were then placed inside legitimate luggage, expensive suitcases and duffel bags that wouldn't attract attention. To mask any residual scent from drug money, the bags were packed with coffee grounds, industrial detergent, or strong-smelling food items. The cartel had tested various masking agents extensively and found that K9 units had difficulty detecting currency through these barriers. The packed bags were checked onto domestic flights using false identification and legitimate tickets purchased with clean credit cards. Each bag carried routing codes that would direct it through specific screening stations where compromised TSA agents like Rivera would ensure smooth passage. Rivera's job was simple but critical. When bags with specific routing codes came through his station, he would perform a cursory inspection and wave them through without running detailed scans or opening them for physical inspection. The X-ray images would show what appeared to be normal luggage contents. The coffee grounds and other masking materials created confusing shadows that obscured the cash bundles. At destination airports, cartel operatives posing as legitimate passengers would claim the bags and transport them to counting houses. There, the money would be sorted, cleaned, and prepared for wire transfer to Mexican financial institutions. The entire process, from street corner to bank account, took less than 48 hours. Rivera quickly learned that he wasn't the only TSA agent involved. The operation included corrupt employees at airports in Atlanta, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Chicago. They communicated through encrypted messaging apps, using code names and careful language to avoid detection. His compensation escalated rapidly. What started as $5,000 payments grew to $15,000, then $25,000 per successful transfer. But the cartel didn't pay him directly in cash. That would create too obvious a paper trail. Instead, they used Bitcoin transfers to addresses Rivera controlled and high-value items delivered to secure lockers throughout Miami. Rolex watches, diamond jewelry, gold bars, all untraceable luxury items that Rivera could sell independently. He was careful to liquidate them slowly through different dealers, always staying below amounts that would trigger federal reporting requirements. By the time Hurricane Ian disrupted his operation, investigators estimate Rivera had accumulated over $800,000 in compensation while facilitating the movement of $19.3 million in cartel proceeds. A typical operation began with an encrypted text message to one of Rivera's rotating burner phones. The message would contain flight numbers, baggage identification codes, and specific timing windows. Rivera learned to recognize the patterns. Certain flights from certain cities that consistently carried priority cargo. Flight A2847 from Chicago to Miami, arriving at 3:15 p.m. Bag identification, Delta 7792. Screening window 3:45 to 4:15 p.m. Rivera would position himself at his station during the specified time frame and watch for bags with matching codes. The cartel's computer infiltration meant their bags carried legitimate routing information. They weren't bypassing the system, they were using it. When the targeted bags appeared on his conveyor belt, Rivera would perform what appeared to be normal screening procedures. He would examine the X-ray image, run his hands around the bag's exterior, and complete the standard documentation. But he wouldn't look too closely at the confusing shadows on the screen, wouldn't question why a bag felt heavier than expected, wouldn't investigate unusual density patterns. The entire process took less than 2 minutes per bag. To casual observers, Rivera appeared to be doing his job normally. Only someone studying his patterns over months would notice that certain types of bags consistently moved through his station faster than others. Rivera became skilled at the performance. He learned to vary his behavior enough to avoid suspicion while maintaining the consistency the cartel required. He developed techniques for obscuring X-ray images when necessary, ways to distract colleagues during critical moments, and methods for ensuring bags reach the correct collection points. The psychological toll was significant but manageable. Rivera had always been comfortable with isolation and deception. His natural introversion actually helped. He wasn't the type to confide in coworkers or seek reassurance about his activities. He could compartmentalize his legitimate job from his criminal activities, maintaining the facade of normal employment while systematically betraying everything his position represented. The cartel's operational security was extraordinary. Communications were always through encrypted channels using code words and timing references that would be meaningless to outside observers. Payments were made through complex cryptocurrencies and physical deliveries that left no direct connection to the criminal organization. Most importantly, Rivera was never directly contacted by high-level cartel members. His handler, Miguel Herrera, maintained the fiction that he worked for legitimate logistics companies. Rivera could tell himself, and investigators if caught, that he thought he was helping business executives avoid bureaucratic delays, not laundering drug money, but deep down he knew. The amounts were too large, the security too elaborate, the payments too generous for legitimate business. Rivera had chosen to ignore obvious signs because the money was too good and the risk seemed manageable. He was wrong about the risk. September 28, 2023. Hurricane Ian made landfall on Florida's west coast with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour, becoming one of the strongest storms ever to hit the United States. The hurricane's impact extended far beyond physical destruction. It disrupted flight schedules, power grids, and communication systems across the southeastern United States. For Rivera and the cartel's money laundering operation, the storm created chaos they hadn't planned for. Flights were canceled, rerouted, or delayed for days. Thousands of bags were separated from their intended destinations, creating a logistical nightmare for legitimate travelers and criminal organizations alike. One particular duffel bag, originally tagged for a connection through Atlanta, ended up in Miami International's lost luggage facility when its connecting flight was canceled. The bag sat unopened for 3 days while the storm passed and normal operations resumed. Rosa Martinez had worked lost luggage for 12 years. She'd seen wedding dresses, cremated remains, live animals, and every conceivable type of personal belonging. But when she unzipped the black duffel bag to identify its owner, she found something that made her immediately call security. Neatly stacked bundles of $20 bills, rubber banded and wrapped in plastic, filled the entire bag. The money was organized with military precision, each bundle containing exactly $10,000, wrapped in plastic to prevent moisture damage, and secured with rubber bands marked with small symbols that Martinez didn't recognize. A quick count revealed $1.2 million in cash. "I found money before," Martinez later testified before a federal grand jury. "Maybe a few $100s someone forgot in a jacket pocket. But this was different. This looked professional, organized like someone's business." Airport security immediately sealed the lost luggage area and contacted the FBI. Within 2 hours, Special Agent Sarah Kim was standing in the sterile, fluorescent lighting of the facility, staring at evidence of what would become one of the largest money laundering investigations in TSA history. The bag's routing codes led investigators directly to Rivera's screening station. But that was just the beginning. Agent Kim had seen money laundering cases before, but never one involving airport security systems. The sophistication of the operation became clear as investigators traced the bag's journey through multiple databases and security checkpoints. The bag had originated in Chicago, checked by a passenger named David Martinez using identification that investigators would later discover was completely fabricated. The ticket had been purchased with a credit card tied to a shell company registered in Delaware. The routing codes directing the bag through Miami were legitimate. Somehow, the criminal organization had access to TSA's internal baggage management systems. This wasn't some amateur operation, Agent Kim recalls. These people had infiltrated our computer systems, created false identities that passed initial screening, and developed protocols for moving money that appeared completely legitimate until you looked closely. The investigation expanded rapidly. Computer forensics experts analyzed the baggage routing systems and discovered evidence of unauthorized access dating back over 2 years. Financial analysts traced the shell companies and bank accounts connected to the operation. Surveillance teams began monitoring Rivera and other airport employees who had processed suspicious bags. But the deeper investigators dug, the more sophisticated the criminal network appeared. Bank records showed that millions of dollars had been moved through accounts connected to the operation. Phone intercepts revealed coded conversations between criminal operatives across multiple states. Property records indicated that the organization owned legitimate businesses, real estate, and other assets that provided cover for their activities. Agent Kim realized they were dealing with something much larger than a single corrupt TSA agent. This was an organized criminal enterprise that had systematically infiltrated America's aviation security infrastructure. The challenge was building a case without alerting the criminals. Rivera and his associates had to be kept under surveillance while investigators gathered evidence and identified all members of the organization. Premature arrests would allow key figures to escape and destroy evidence. "We needed to map the entire network before we moved," Agent Kim explains. "Rivera was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. If we grabbed him too early, the rest of the organization would disappear." The surveillance operation involved over 50 federal agents monitoring Rivera's activities 24 hours a day. They tracked his movements, recorded his communications, and analyzed his financial transactions. Slowly, a picture emerged of a criminal network that extended far beyond Miami International Airport. But Rivera was smarter than they anticipated. By early October 2023, Rivera had begun to suspect he was being watched. Years of observing security procedures had given him an intuitive understanding of surveillance techniques. He noticed the same faces appearing repeatedly in different locations. He observed vehicles following consistent routes behind his commute. Most importantly, he detected subtle changes in his coworkers' behavior that suggested they had been questioned about him. Rivera's paranoia was justified. FBI surveillance teams had been monitoring him for 3 weeks, and despite their professionalism, it was difficult to maintain complete invisibility around someone who understood security operations as well as Rivera did. The first concrete warning came from an unexpected source. During a routine employee meeting on October 8th, TSA management mentioned that federal auditors would be conducting a comprehensive review of baggage screening procedures. To Rivera, this wasn't a coincidence. It was a clear signal that his operation had been discovered. Rivera immediately activated emergency protocols the cartel had established for compromised assets. Using a secure messaging app, he sent coded signals to his handler indicating that he suspected law enforcement surveillance. The response came within hours. Extraction procedures were being implemented. The cartel's contingency planning was comprehensive. They had prepared false documentation, transportation routes, and safe houses for situations exactly like this. Rivera had been valuable enough that the organization was willing to invest significant resources in protecting him from capture. But Rivera also had his own plans. Over the preceding months, he had skimmed money from several operations without the cartel's knowledge. While his official compensation was substantial, Rivera had been secretly diverting additional funds to personal accounts. He estimated he had accumulated over $2.3 million in assets that the cartel knew nothing about. Rivera faced a choice: rely on the cartel's extraction plan and remain under their control indefinitely, or implement his own escape strategy and disappear with the money he had stolen from them. Either option meant abandoning his life in Miami forever. He chose independence. Rivera's last days at Miami International were a masterclass in deception. While federal agents watched his every move and cartel handlers prepared extraction procedures, he was implementing his own plan to steal one final score and vanish completely. On October 12th, Rivera received notification of an unusually large transfer. Flight UA-1847 from Los Angeles would be carrying multiple bags containing over $4.2 million in cartel proceeds. The operation required precise timing. 5 bags needed to be processed through his station within a 30-minute window. But Rivera had modified the plan without telling his handlers. Instead of simply waving the bags through screening, he arranged for them to be rerouted to a secure holding area where he could access them after his shift ended. The modification required Rivera to exploit multiple security vulnerabilities simultaneously. He altered routing codes in the computer system, created false documentation indicating the bags required additional inspection, and arranged for a maintenance issue that would clear the secure area of other personnel during his access window. The operation was audacious even by cartel standards. Rivera was essentially stealing from his criminal employers while under active FBI surveillance, betting that he could outmaneuver both law enforcement and organized crime. On the evening of October 14, Rivera accessed the secure holding area and transferred the contents of 3 bags, approximately $2.8 million in cash, to a maintenance card he had prepared earlier. The money was concealed inside legitimate airport equipment and wheeled through security checkpoints to a predetermined location in the airport's service areas. Rivera's plan required split-second timing and intimate knowledge of airport operations. He had studied security camera blind spots, shift change schedules, and maintenance procedures. The entire theft took less than 18 minutes, during which Rivera appeared on surveillance footage as a maintenance worker performing routine equipment checks. The stolen money was transferred to a rented storage unit off airport property, where Rivera had prepared additional supplies for his disappearance: fake identification documents, prepaid credit cards, cash for travel expenses, and clothing that would alter his appearance. But Rivera made one critical error. In his haste to complete the theft, he left behind partial fingerprints on one of the emptied bags. Those prints would provide federal investigators with the evidence they needed to identify him as more than just a corrupt screener. He was an active thief who had stolen from the very criminals he was supposed to be helping. October 15, 2023. Rivera arrived at work knowing it would be his final day as a TSA agent. Federal surveillance teams noted no unusual behavior during his morning routine. He purchased coffee from the same vendor, exchanged greetings with the same colleagues, and settled into his workstation with the same methodical precision he had displayed for 4 years. But Rivera was systematically erasing himself from Miami International Airport. During his first break, he visited his employee locker and removed all personal items, placing them in a small backpack he carried throughout the shift. During lunch, he used airport computers to delete files from his personnel records and clear his browsing history from security terminals. Most critically, Rivera spent the day observing federal surveillance teams. His years of security training had taught him to recognize law enforcement techniques, and he used that knowledge to identify agents and anticipate their movements. By afternoon, he had mapped their positions and identified gaps in their coverage. At 3:15 p.m., Rivera received what investigators believe was his final communication from the cartel. Phone records show a brief call from a burner number, lasting less than 30 seconds. The caller, likely his handler Miguel Herrera, was probably warning him that extraction procedures were being implemented and providing instructions for the evening rendezvous. Rivera ignored the instructions. Instead of following the cartel's escape plan, he activated his own. During his final break, Rivera changed from his TSA uniform into civilian clothes in a maintenance restroom outside the view of surveillance cameras. He altered his appearance using supplies he had hidden in his locker: a baseball cap, different shoes, and a reversible jacket that changed his silhouette. The transformation took less than 5 minutes. Rivera emerged from the restroom looking like a different person, just another airport maintenance worker ending his shift and heading home. At 11:23 p.m., surveillance cameras captured Rivera walking through the employee exit. He appeared calm, unhurried, carrying nothing but a small backpack. His security badge was scanned for the final time as he passed through the checkpoint. Rivera walked directly to the employee parking garage, but instead of going to his assigned parking space, he took a service elevator to the building's lower level. There, hidden behind maintenance equipment, was a mountain bike he had placed earlier in the week. Rivera pedaled through service tunnels that connected the parking garage to Miami's public transportation system. The tunnels were outside the airport's security perimeter and not covered by surveillance cameras. Within 30 minutes of leaving his workstation, Rivera had completely disappeared from federal surveillance. His abandoned Honda Civic sat in the airport parking garage for 5 days before security ran the license plates and discovered it belonged to one of America's most wanted fugitives. When Rivera failed to report for his shift on October 16th, TSA supervisors initially assumed he was sick or dealing with a personal emergency. Rivera had never missed work without notification, but employees occasionally faced family crises or health issues that prevented them from following proper procedures. By the afternoon, when Rivera hadn't responded to phone calls or text messages, management became concerned. A supervisor was dispatched to his apartment to conduct a welfare check. They found his apartment completely empty. Not just empty of personal belongings. Rivera had removed every trace of his existence from the space. Furniture remained, but every photograph, document, book, and electronic device was gone. The refrigerator had been cleaned and unplugged. Closets were empty. Even the trash had been removed. It looked like no one had ever lived there, recalls the TSA supervisor who conducted the welfare check. Not just moved out, completely erased, like the apartment was staged for a real estate showing. The supervisor immediately contacted airport security, who ran Rivera's employee identification number through federal databases. Within hours, the connection to the money laundering investigation became clear, and FBI agents were racing to Rivera's apartment. Agent Kim arrived to find a crime scene that revealed the depth of Rivera's planning. Forensic analysts determined that Rivera had been systematically removing personal items from his apartment for weeks, probably since he first suspected surveillance. The cleaning had been professional level. No fingerprints, no DNA evidence, no indication of where he might have gone. But Rivera had made mistakes. Bank records showed that he had been gradually emptying his accounts, but the withdrawals revealed patterns that provided clues about his escape plan. ATM cameras had captured images of Rivera making his final withdrawal. $9,800 in cash at 2:47 a.m. on October 16th, less than 4 hours after he left the airport. More importantly, investigators discovered that Rivera had rented a storage unit under a false name 6 weeks before his disappearance. When FBI agents obtained a warrant to search the unit, they found it empty. But security cameras at the facility had recorded Rivera visiting the location multiple times during September and October. The storage unit footage provided federal investigators with their first real evidence of Rivera's escape preparations. He had been planning his disappearance for months, moving money and supplies to secure locations while maintaining the appearance of normal employment. Agent Kim realized they were dealing with someone far more sophisticated than a typical airport security screener. Rivera had demonstrated skills in financial planning, operational security, and surveillance detection that suggested either extensive training or natural criminal talent. The manhunt was about to begin. Federal agents had a 12-hour head start before Rivera's disappearance was confirmed, but he had been planning his escape for months. The investigation quickly revealed that Rivera had created multiple false identities, established accounts with cryptocurrency exchanges, and arranged transportation through criminal networks that operated independently of his cartel connections. The breakthrough came from traffic cameras in Homestead, Florida, about 30 miles south of Miami. Facial recognition software flagged a man matching Rivera's description purchasing supplies at a gas station on October 16th at 4:17 a.m. The timestamp indicated Rivera had traveled directly from his final ATM withdrawal to this location. Security footage from the gas station showed Rivera purchasing items consistent with long-distance travel, energy drinks, snack foods, maps, and a prepaid phone. More importantly, the cameras captured the license plate of the vehicle he was driving, a Toyota Camry registered to a name that didn't exist in any government database. Rivera had created an entire false identity complete with driver's license, social security number, and vehicle registration. Agent Kim explains. He wasn't just running, he had become someone else entirely. The investigation revealed that Rivera had been developing his false identity for over a year, probably as insurance against exactly this situation. He had rented apartments, established credit histories, and even filed tax returns under his assumed name. The level of planning suggested either assistance from professional identity thieves or remarkable criminal sophistication. Tracking the Toyota led investigators to a rental car agency in Key Largo that specialized in vehicles for cash transactions. The owner, later charged as an accessory, had provided Rivera with the Camry in exchange for $15,000 cash and no questions asked. The vehicle had been equipped with a hidden GPS tracking device that Rivera had somehow disabled. From Key Largo, Rivera's trail led to Marathon, then Key West, suggesting he was following the Florida Keys toward an eventual water crossing. Maritime surveillance indicated that several boats had left the Keys for international waters during the time frame of Rivera's disappearance, but none could be definitively connected to him. The FBI's theory was that Rivera had arranged boat transportation to the Bahamas or Cuba, from where he could access international transportation networks beyond American law enforcement reach. The theory was supported by communication intercepts showing that Rivera had contacted human trafficking organizations that specialized in providing transportation for high-value fugitives. But Rivera had covered his tracks expertly. The boat operators either didn't know his real identity or were too frightened of retribution to cooperate with federal investigators. Phone records, financial transactions, and surveillance footage from the Keys provided tantalizing clues, but no definitive evidence of Rivera's final destination. After 48 hours, the trail went completely cold. Rivera had vanished as completely as the millions of dollars he had helped steal. While federal agents searched for Rivera, the Sinaloa Cartel was conducting its own investigation. The organization had lost over $4 million in the final heist, and worse, they had been betrayed by someone they trusted with their most sensitive operations. Intercepted communications revealed that Miguel Herrera, Rivera's handler, was under suspicion from his own organization. Cartel leaders believed either that Herrera had been compromised by federal agents or that he had participated in Rivera's theft. In the violent world of drug trafficking, both scenarios carried death sentences. Within a week of Rivera's disappearance, Herrera himself vanished from his Miami apartment. Unlike Rivera's methodical erasure, Herrera's disappearance was sudden and violent. Blood evidence suggested he had been forcibly removed, and investigators found signs of a struggle throughout his residence. Herrera's body was discovered 3 weeks later in a remote area of the Everglades, showing clear signs of torture and execution. The message from cartel leadership was clear. Betrayal would not be tolerated, and Rivera had become a target for assassination as well as arrest. "The cartel wants Rivera back more than we do," Agent Kim observed. "He stole their money, compromised their operation, and humiliated their security. They'll spend whatever it takes to find him." This created an unusual dynamic in the manhunt. Federal agents were competing with criminal organizations to locate Rivera, but for very different reasons. Law enforcement wanted his testimony to prosecute the remaining members of the money laundering network. The cartel wanted him dead. Intelligence reports suggested that the Sinaloa organization had placed a $5 million bounty on Rivera's head, far exceeding the FBI's official reward. Professional assassins, bounty hunters, and criminal informants across the Americas were searching for the former TSA agent. Paradoxically, this may have helped Rivera evade capture. Anyone who found him would have to choose between turning him into authorities for a $1 million reward or selling him to the cartel for $5 million. The higher payout meant that legitimate tips to law enforcement were less likely, while criminal sources would be incentivized to turn Rivera over to people who would kill him. The cartel's involvement also complicated the FBI's investigation. Traditional informants were reluctant to provide information when it might put them in conflict with violent criminal organizations. Surveillance operations became more dangerous when agents had to watch for cartel operatives, as well as their primary target. Rivera had made enemies of both law enforcement and organized crime. He was being hunted by two organizations with global reach, sophisticated surveillance capabilities, and strong motivations to find him. Yet somehow he continued to evade both. 6 months after Rivera's disappearance, the investigation had expanded to 12 countries across 3 continents. Interpol issued a red notice for his arrest, and federal agencies coordinated with law enforcement organizations worldwide to track potential sightings and financial transactions. The first credible lead came from Grand Cayman, where banking authorities flagged suspicious cryptocurrency transactions connected to wallets Rivera had established before his disappearance. The transfers suggested he was alive and had access to hidden assets, but the digital trail led through multiple exchanges and wallet addresses that obscured his location. A second lead emerged from Costa Rica, where immigration officials identified a man matching Rivera's description, entering the country using false documentation. Security camera footage from Juan Santamaria International Airport showed someone who resembled Rivera, but facial recognition analysis was inconclusive due to apparent surgical alterations. Rivera seems to have undergone significant cosmetic procedures to change his appearance, Agent Kim noted. The person in the Costa Rica footage has the same height and build, but different facial features. Either it's not him, or he's invested in professional plastic surgery. The Costa Rica sighting triggered extensive surveillance operations in Central America. FBI legal attachés coordinated with local law enforcement to monitor hotels, transportation hubs, and financial institutions. The search revealed a network of criminal services, document forgers, plastic surgeons, and safe house operators that specialized in hiding high-value fugitives from international law enforcement. But Rivera stayed ahead of his pursuers. Intelligence suggested he was moving frequently, never staying in any location for more than a few weeks, and using different identities for each transition. He had apparently learned from the operational security techniques the cartel had taught him and was applying those skills to his own survival. The investigation also revealed that Rivera wasn't the only airport employee who had disappeared. Similar cases emerged in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Atlanta, suggesting that the criminal network had implemented extraction procedures for multiple compromised assets. The FBI was dealing with not just one fugitive, but an entire network of criminal operatives who had vanished simultaneously. Each disappeared employee represented millions of dollars in stolen proceeds and years of intelligence about airport security vulnerabilities. Their continued freedom posed ongoing threats to aviation security and enabled criminal organizations to refine their infiltration techniques. Rivera and the others like him represent a new type of criminal, Agent Kim observed. They're not just thieves or drug dealers. They're professionals with specialized knowledge that makes them extremely valuable to criminal organizations worldwide. In March 2025, Colombian authorities intercepted communications suggesting that Rivera had established residency in a remote, mountain region controlled by FARC dissidents. The intelligence came from a captured cartel operative who claimed Rivera was providing security training to guerrilla fighters in exchange for protection from both American law enforcement and Sinaloa assassins. The report seemed incredible at first, a former TSA agent training leftist guerrillas in rural Colombia. But further investigation revealed that Rivera's knowledge of airport security procedures, surveillance techniques, and financial systems would be extremely valuable to any criminal organization seeking to move people or money internationally. Rivera isn't just hiding in Colombia, Agent Kim realized. He's working. His skills are too valuable for him to remain idle, and he needs income to maintain his lifestyle and security. Colombian National Police conducted surveillance operations in the suspected region, but found no trace of Rivera. The mountain areas were effectively controlled by criminal organizations that viewed government forces as enemies. Any law enforcement presence was detected immediately and countered with violence. However, the investigation did reveal evidence of increased sophisticated criminal activity in the region. Local authorities reported that guerrilla groups had begun using advanced encryption technologies, implementing complex financial systems, and demonstrating knowledge of international money laundering techniques that exceeded their historical capabilities. Someone with professional criminal training has been teaching these groups, observed Colonel Maria Santos of the Colombian National Police. Their operational security has improved dramatically over the past year. That doesn't happen by accident. The Colombia connection also explained how Rivera might have financed his disappearance and reconstruction. Providing training services to multiple criminal organizations could generate millions of dollars in income while keeping him mobile and protected by groups with strong incentives to prevent his capture. Intelligence analysts theorized that Rivera had essentially become a criminal consultant, moving between different organizations and providing specialized knowledge in exchange for money, protection, and new identities. His expertise in airport security made him valuable to any group involved in international smuggling operations. But the theory also suggested that Rivera was becoming more dangerous with time. Instead of simply hiding from law enforcement, he was actively sharing knowledge that could be used to compromise aviation security worldwide. The closest federal agents came to capturing Rivera occurred in August 2025 at Tocumen International Airport in Panama City. Intelligence sources reported that a man matching Rivera's post-surgery description had been seen meeting with known human traffickers at the airport's VIP lounge. FBI agents and Panamanian authorities coordinated a surveillance operation designed to monitor the suspected meeting without alerting the targets. If the man was indeed Rivera, they planned to arrest him as he attempted to leave the airport. The operation nearly succeeded. Security cameras captured images of a man who resembled the post-surgery Rivera photographs from Brazil, engaged in conversation with individuals known to law enforcement as professional document forgers. The meeting appeared to be a transaction. Money was exchanged for what looked like passports and travel documents. But as federal agents moved to make an arrest, the suspect seemed to recognize the surveillance operation. He calmly walked to a restroom, and when agents followed, they found the facility empty. A service entrance that connected to the airport's mechanical systems had been left open, providing an escape route that bypassed all security checkpoints. "He made us," Agent Kim reported after reviewing surveillance footage. "Rivera spotted our operation and disappeared before we could get close. Either he's gotten very good at detecting surveillance, or someone warned him." The Panama incident suggested that Rivera had developed an extensive network of criminal contacts who could provide protection and early warning of law enforcement activities. His ability to disappear from a controlled environment like an international airport, demonstrated sophisticated operational planning and detailed knowledge of aviation security systems. Analysis of the surveillance footage provided investigators with their clearest images of Rivera since his disappearance. The plastic surgery had indeed transformed his appearance dramatically, but certain physical characteristics, height, build, movement patterns, remained consistent with the original suspect. "We know what he looks like now," Agent Kim observed. "The question is whether that knowledge will help us catch him." The Panama operation also revealed that Rivera was actively using false documentation to travel internationally. The passports he received during the airport meeting were later traced to a sophisticated forgery network that provided documents for high-level criminals worldwide. Most disturbing was the discovery that Rivera had been in Panama to arrange transportation for other fugitives. Intelligence suggested he was operating as a broker, connecting wanted criminals with transportation networks and providing expertise on evading international law enforcement. Rivera had evolved from fugitive to facilitator, using his knowledge and connections to help other criminals escape justice while generating income for his own operations. While federal agents pursued Rivera through legitimate law enforcement channels, the Sinaloa Cartel was conducting its own search using methods unavailable to government investigators. Their approach was more direct, more violent, and potentially more effective. In September 2025, the bodies of 3 men were found in a remote area of Honduras, all showing signs of torture and execution. Intelligence sources identified the victims as document forgers who had provided false identification to Rivera during his early months as a fugitive. Each man had been tortured for information about Rivera's whereabouts before being killed. The cartel is working backwards through Rivera's network, Agent Kim realized. They're systematically eliminating everyone who helped him disappear, hoping to find someone who knows where he is now. But the violent investigation was also warning Rivera that his former protectors were being eliminated. Intelligence intercepts suggested that Rivera had begun moving more frequently and changing his operational patterns in response to the cartel's activities. The FBI continues to seek information about Marcus Rivera's whereabouts. Anyone with information is asked to contact the FBI's Miami field office or submit tips through the FBI's website. A reward of up to $2 million is being offered for information leading to his arrest and conviction.